Kia ora Year 9. In this video, I'm going to go through one of the core skills that we want you to get really confident with in Year 9, and that's how to increase or decrease by a percentage, and how to do that using a thing called the multiplier. Once you've finished going through this video and doing all the practice questions in it, you can do more practice on Dr. Frost if you go to skills 221, and the basic ones are A and B. There are a couple of harder ones after that as well. So the first couple of examples we're going to do in here are ones that some of you might have figured out how to do at primary school, right? So we're going to learn how to increase $120 by 30% and how to decrease $120 by 30%. I'm going to do that the old way first, and then I'm going to teach you how we can do that more quickly using a multiplier. And these kind of problems come up all the time in real life, right? So that's why I've popped in these pictures, just to remind us that usually when we're looking at percentages, it will be in context, right? There'll be something like there is a Garmin watch for $499 and it's on sale with a discount of 12%, right? But in this video, there aren't going to be any word problems. It's just going to be numbers. You're also encouraged to use your calculators here. You won't need to do that for some of the easy numbers, but often when you're dealing with money problems, they will get pretty messy and you'd be better off to use the calculator. So the first one, where we want to increase $120 by 30%, we can think of that as $120 is the full amount, and we want to add on some of that. Now, to get 30%, we can do this one without a calculator, right? So think about 10% of $120 is going to be $12, right? So 30% of $120 is going to be $36. So we can work out 30% of the amount and add it on to 120. So it will be 120 plus $36, which gives me $156. All right, so that's one way to go. We don't really want to have to do that much slow working things out every time we hit one of these problems though, right? Similarly, if we want to decrease $120 by 30%, we can work out again, well, 10%, I'm just redoing what I did, so 10% of 120 is $12, 30% is $36, and so we need to take the 120 and subtract that $36 amount, and that's going to give me $84. Okay, so this is how we do it using the multiplier instead. And once you get used to it, most students find this pretty easy. If you think about what we're starting with, that's 100%. And in the first question, we want to increase by 30%. So we're going to have 100% plus 30%, and that gives me a total at the end of 130%. But we're pretty good now at converting between percentages, fractions, and decimals, so we know that we can write that as 1.3, right? Because the percent sign here means 130 divided by 100, okay, which as a decimal is 1.3. So now if we want to increase 120 by 30%, we take the 120 and we times it by 1.3, and that gets me straight to my answer of 156%. Okay, so this is what we call using the multiplier, and this number here is the multiplier. So to increase by a percentage, we're going to take the 100%, and we're going to add the extra, and then we're going to turn that into a decimal. Let's do one now for decreasing by 30%. So we're going to have 100%, we're going to have take away 30%, that gives me 70%. We can turn 70% into a decimal, which is 0.7, and we say our final answer is going to be 120 times 0.7, which gives me $84. Now, in some ways, it's nicer. The order that we do these in obviously doesn't matter because multiplication is commutative. The order of multiplication doesn't matter. But it's kind of nicer when you're learning it for the first time to think of it as 70% is 0.7. So 0.7 times 120. So when I do the examples later in the video, I'm going to work in this order, right? So 0.7 times 120 gives me $84. Now, lots of you are probably going, well, that was actually more work for that example, and I agree. But often when we get to messier examples, it is going to be much faster to figure out the multiplier and then bung it into your calculator using that approach. The other reason that we teach you how to use a multiplier is it means that we can start to work backwards much, much more easily. And we'll get to that in a couple more lessons. Okay, but for now, what we want to do is do some drill practice at finding the multiplier. Okay, so I'll just read through my instructions here. This is your turn to do it, and we need to get confident at finding the multiplier. So here, we're told that I want to increase by 5%, and over here in this column, we're going to write what the multiplier number is. So some of you will be able to go straight to the answer, but some of you will start by writing down 100 plus 5, gives me 105%, which equals 1.05. If you're confident, you don't need to do that working, okay? And we want you getting to a point where you can very easily go from some words like this to finding the multiplier. So that second one will be 100 take away 5, gives me 95%, which is equal to 0.95. Just going to make this a wee bit bigger so that we can write it there. So what I want you to do now is to pause the screen and quickly do these into your book. You don't have to write out the whole table. You just need to write out these questions. Okay, so pause the screen and grab your book and your pen and quickly whoosh through these multipliers, and I'm going to go through them now as well. Okay, so to increase by 12%, we have 100% plus 12%, 112%, which is equal to 1.12. Decrease by 12%, we have 100% take away 12%, right? So 100 take away 12 is 88%. So my multiplier is 0.88, and so on. I'm going to go straight to the answers on these next ones. You'll notice that the increase by ones are much easier because you can do those in your head. So 123% will be 1.23 for my multiplier. Decrease by 28%. Remember, we're taking 100% and we're subtracting 28%. That gives me 72%. So my multiplier will be 0.72. Decrease by 2% will give me 100 minus 2 is 98%, so that's 0.98. Increase by 114% gives me 114%, which is 1.14. Increase by 39% gives me 139%, 1.39. Now in here, increase by 42.3%, that gives me 100 plus that, so 142.3%. That's going to be 1.423. Decrease by 23.2%. So some of you might start to need your calculators around this point, but hopefully not. Most of you can probably do 100 minus that in your head, and that will get you 76.8%. So that's going to be 0.768. Next one, 100 minus 41.1 will give us 58.9%, which is 0.589. And lastly, 100 minus 54.3% will give us 45.7%. So the multiplier will be 0.457. Okay, so you should have these multipliers all written down. Just for some quick practice. Now what we're going to do is the final bit where we're actually using the multiplier to solve problems. Okay, so using our new method, if we've got increase $350 by 12%, the multiplier will be 1.12. So we have 1.12 times 350. Okay, I just had to go grab my calculator to start doing these, sorry. So 1.12 times 350 is going to give me 392. Now, a couple of things to notice. When you're doing these examples into your book, and I'm going to give you some to do next, just 4, you need to make sure you don't have to write out all the wordy part of the question, but you need to always be showing your working line like that, right? You don't have to do working to show your multiplier. If you can confidently do that in your head, that's totally fine. If you can't confidently do it in your head, first of all, write down the line that says 100% plus 12% is equal to 112%, right? Is equal to 1.12. So write that down if you need to, but it's not compulsory. But that second line there, to show the reader what we're doing when we're doing our increase by percentage, we want you to write this line down when you're doing working for these problems. Okay, so the last thing to say is that when you have dollars and cents, you should round to the nearest cent. Right, so pause the video now and do those 4 into your book, remembering to write down your working line as you go. Okay, so here we go. So the first one will be 1.1 times 345. Whoops. That gives me $379.50. Now your calculator is going to say just 0.5. That looks really silly. Make sure you're always putting that 0 on for dollars and cents. Decrease 427 by 20%. The multiplier will be 0.8. 0.8 times 427 gives us $341.60. Increase by 2% is going to give me a multiplier of 1.02 times $31,000. That equals 31,620. And the last one, decrease this by that much. So this is one where I might do some working for my multiplier first. So 100% take away 32.1% gives me 67.9%. Okay, so there's your working line for that. And now using the multiplier, 0.679 times 689. And that gives me $467.83, right? So I've rounded this. It had a 1 on the end of it, but we round that down, okay? So there you go. Quite a long video, but it's a pretty important skill. So we want you to get really, really good at this. So now, over the next couple of days, you'll be doing some practice on this using Dr. Frost and some textbook work. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you've got any questions or don't understand anything that I've done in here.